So I'm on the red carpet, and then this guy goes, Blake, your tweets are amazing.
Wait, what?
Right? And I was like, wait. He was like, your tweets are amazing. And I was like, are we saying that? Like, this is not okay.
You don't talk like that, no.
And the woman's like, next to him goes, well, I mean, they are. And I was like, well, thank you. And your husband's tweets are even better. And I was like, oh, tweets.
Blake Lively is standing at the epicenter of a public meltdown, and the only people still in her corner look like they're charging by the hour. Yesterday, I broke down how Justin Baldoni's former agent, a man with no allegiance to Justin and nothing to gain from sticking his neck out, showed up to a deposition and described Blake's entire power play as what felt like extortion. Not a misunderstanding, not a miscommunication. What appears to be a strategy of pressure and manipulation, backed by texts, emails, and a timeline that reads more like a slow-motion takeover than a creative disagreement. And now we pivot to the person who should be Blake's most reliable witness, her manager, the guy who should know everything, the man whose entire job revolves around advocating for his client, protecting her reputation, and running point when things get ugly. And what did he do when the court came knocking? He walked in, calm and collected, and handed the court exactly what Blake didn't need, the truth. Because when asked directly if Blake Lively had come to him with harassment concerns, emotional distress, or even the slightest whisper of a problem on the "it ends with us" set, he didn't stammer. He didn't hedge. He didn't play semantics. He just said no. And that no might be the most damning word in Blake's whole case. Because this wasn't her hairstylist. It wasn't a friend from Pilates. This was the person paid to manage her entire career. Someone whose full-time job is to be looped in on any threat to her brand. If something was wrong, he would have been the first call, the fixer, the handler, the chess master behind the curtain. But apparently, she never told him a thing. That leaves two options. Either Blake Lively was so isolated and fearful that she couldn't even confide in her most trusted advisor, or she had nothing to say in the first place. And right now, the second option is the one echoing through every page of this court file. The man did not try to cover for her. He didn't say, "Sure, she told me multiple times she was being harassed." He didn't fake shock or play dumb. He looked at her, metaphorically, and said, "I'll take your check, but I won't lie." It was the corporate equivalent of telling someone, "I support you in theory, but I will not be catching a charge." And what makes it so cold is that he didn't even seem mad about it. This wasn't betrayal. This was detachment. Like someone silently counting down the days until their contract expires and their email stops bouncing back. You could almost picture him on the stand, polite, composed, but checked out. The look of a man who's already moved on to his next client, the one who's not going to drag him into depositions or subpoenas. That quiet professionalism wasn't loyalty, it was survival. You would think Blake would be stacking declarations right now. Friends, coworkers, fellow actors, a wall of support. Instead, the people who are showing up are doing the legal version of saying, "Yeah, I was there, I saw things, and nothing you're describing ever happened." The irony is painful. This was supposed to be her inner circle, and now they're the ones quietly poking holes in her story without even trying. Every time someone from her camp testifies, it just confirms that she didn't talk about any harassment until after things got messy with Wayfarer. Not during filming, not in private emails, not through her team, not once. And you can practically feel the courtroom's patience thinning. Every new witness walks in, sits down, and adds another layer of distance between Blake and her own allegations. And let's not forget, this is the same Blake Lively who claimed she was so terrified of Justin Baldoni that she couldn't even enter a Zoom call without shutting her camera off. But somehow, she still managed to negotiate her contract, argue for her executive producer credit, and push for specific marketing control, all while being allegedly too traumatized to speak in meetings. The duality of that doesn't read as fear, it reads as strategy. Like someone weaponizing fragility when it benefits the moment, then snapping back to full control when it comes to money and power. Pick one, because these two stories do not coexist. You cannot be both a fragile flower wilting under mistreatment and also a deal-making steamroller who demands first-class airfare for your 4 kids, 2 nannies, personal security, and a handwritten apology from every intern who forgets your almond milk latte. You can't plead helplessness while running your own PR machine. You can't claim emotional distress while still approving press shots, reviewing trailers, and monitoring who gets tagged in promo posts. You cannot claim emotional harm while your manager, who would be the first person to call a lawyer, testifies that you said nothing. A manager doesn't have the luxury of ignorance. If they don't know, it's because they weren't told. And if they weren't told, that silence becomes its own testimony. And that silence is getting louder. You can feel it in how the depositions are landing. Everyone she paid is being asked the same basic question. Did Blake tell you anything? And the answer is always no. Not no but, not no and then later, just no. If this really happened, why was no one looped in? She had the access. She had the leverage. She had the kind of star power that could get an executive removed with a single phone call. But now, when the narrative counts, there is no trail. Just a manager shrugging his way through a deposition and saying she never mentioned it. The simplicity of his answer speaks volumes, because when someone who's built their career on controlling the narrative suddenly has no story to give, it's not an oversight, it's exposure. The optics of that are brutal, because a manager is paid to spin, to protect, to fight in the background. So, if he won't do it now, either he doesn't believe her or she never gave him anything to fight with, and that's the part that's almost poetic. The one person whose job is to protect her image is now, unintentionally, dismantling it by staying neutral. This isn't the kind of silence that comes from loyalty, it's the kind that comes from legal exposure, from people realizing that whatever this is, they don't want their names attached. The kind of silence that feels heavy, not out of sympathy, but self-preservation. They've seen where this train is headed, and they're stepping off the track before it hits. Even Ryan Reynolds, usually the king of chirpy PR, has been quieter than usual. His social media is a ghost town of canned brand posts and awkward silence. No funny quips, no playful dad jokes, just corporate retreat energy, because even he knows this is spiraling, and all his sarcasm can't glue the pieces back together. The machine that once sold couple goals now feels like it's running on fumes, pushing out posts with all the warmth of a tax filing. And let's talk about Blake's silence too, because there hasn't been a denial, there hasn't been a statement, there hasn't even been an anonymous leak blaming the media. Instead, she disappeared, pulled back from press, skipped events, no Instagram story, no Vanity Fair damage control, not even a cryptic quote about truth coming to light, just a digital void where her voice used to be. This is what running looks like. Not screaming, not fighting, just ghosting the mess and hoping the public forgets before the lawyers don't. It's the Hollywood version of moving out in the middle of the night, lights off, blinds drawn, pretending the neighbors won't notice the moving truck. But the public isn't forgetting, because every new filing makes this case look less like a cry for help and more like a backdoor power move that flopped. And now Blake's team, the real one, the one with hourly rates and NDAs, is realizing they might be playing cleanup for a story they were never told to begin with. You can almost sense the fatigue behind those polished statements, like people realizing they're defending a narrative that keeps shifting under their feet. This whole thing feels like a house of cards built on a table no one wanted to sit at. It's not just that Blake's manager didn't lie for her, it's that he didn't even try to look like someone who believed her, and that hits harder than any rebuttal from the other side ever could. And that kind of indifference doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from experience, from knowing when the story doesn't line up and deciding it's better to say nothing than say the wrong thing. So if Blake Lively is looking around and wondering where all her defenders are, maybe the answer is simpler than she wants to admit. They were never there. Only the ones on payroll, only the ones bound by contracts and subpoenas, and even they're not willing to twist themselves into legal knots just to back a story that keeps unraveling. What we're seeing now isn't betrayal. It's the natural collapse of a narrative built without witnesses, without receipts, without support. Because in the end, a house of cards doesn't need a villain to fall apart. It just needs a breeze.
That's my opinion!